Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in the world on the 21st of August of 2026. Today we have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first let's talk about the conflict on the territory of Ukraine. During the previous video we discussed that Ukrainian intelligence confirms Russia has received North Korea's heavier ballistic missiles for the first time. As of July, Russia held approximately 50 North Korean missiles of three types: KN-30, KN-24 and KN-30. A North Korean missile crew of roughly 90 personnel has deployed to Russia's Voronezh Oblast to operate up to 6 launchers. North Korea claims the KN-30 carries a 2,000.5 kilos warhead. So according to pro-Ukrainian sources, the Russians have deployed the North Korean forces in the area of the city by the name of Voronezh, and most likely the Russians would use these ballistic missiles to attack deep inside of the territory of Ukraine. So this is the territory of the Voronezh region, and according to pro-Ukrainian sources, somewhere here we might see the 90 soldiers of North Korea with ballistic missiles and launchers. And during the day we received another report, very interesting report. According to the Ukrainian authorities, North Korea deployed 8,500 new troops to Russia, including 400 drone operators. 400 drone operators is a very big number. According to Ukrainian intelligence chief Skibitsky, the drone unit is expected to conduct reconnaissance and strikes against targets inside Ukraine from Russian territory. The remaining personnel include 1,000 engineers and sappers reinforcing near positions in Russia's Kursk region. So approximately 25,000 North Koreans have rotated through Russia since October 2024. So as you can see, North Korea has approximately 4 brigades on the territory of the Russian Federation. According to information we have, the Russians and the Koreans are not going to use these forces on the territory of Ukraine itself, but these forces will control the border between Ukraine and Russia, which will allow the Russians to release lots of forces and to use them somewhere else. And probably this is the reason why we received the report that, according to information we have, the Ukraine's army chief Dobropillia said NATO's military committee is expected to visit Ukraine in October, its first visit in 8 years. Talks will focus on long-range strikes, air defense and battlefield tactics. I would like to remind you that, according to information we have, the Ukrainians wanted to use Starlink equipment and Starlink system to attack deep inside of the territory of Russia, but as of the end of the 21st of August of 2026, Musk has not approved the request. But the question is whether he is going to save the situation or he will change his mind in the near future. And due to updates with NATO committee and other different things, most likely, if the situation continues deteriorating for the armed forces of Ukraine, sooner or later the Ukrainians will receive this permission. And this is a very important situation, because from this very moment the Russians will have the right to attack these objects in the space as well. Now let's move further and let's discuss long-range and middle-range strikes that have taken place since the beginning of the 21st of August of 2026. We have interesting updates. The Ministry of Defense of Ukraine this morning reported that the Russians used 135 drones to attack the territory of Ukraine, and that the Ukrainians managed to intercept 107. We are talking about the overnight battle that took place between the 20th and the 21st of August of 2026. But the Russians didn't stop attacking the territory of Ukraine at 8 a.m. of the Ukrainian time. The Russians continue attacking the territory of Ukraine, and during the day we received lots of interesting updates. First of all, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians attacked the city of Kryvyi, and the Russians destroyed, it seems, another mall. So this video and these articles were published from this area. In this video we can see the Russian drone that was attacking this facility. Here here we have the moment when the drone struck the small, very heavy explosion broke out right after the Russians attacked the territory. In this video we can see probably the same strike but from another angle. Most likely as a result of this attack, this facility would be reduced to ruins, and I would like to point to your attention that this is not the first facility that was destroyed on the territory of the city of Kryvyi Rog. Since the beginning of July of 2026, the Russians have destroyed at least several warehouses and malls through this territory. For example, several weeks or months ago, somewhere in July or June of 2026, the Russians destroyed this facility. Then during the 26th of July of 2026, the Russians destroyed this facility, and now during the 21st of August of 2026, the Russians damaged and probably have destroyed this facility as well. So as you can see, the Russians are concentrated through this micro district, and most likely within the next month the Russians would destroy every single mall facility through this area, and this could lead to unpredictable consequences, first of all to civilians and to the economy of the entire region. Another important thing is that the Russians are changing their tactics through the southwestern parts of Ukraine, through the Odesa region. During the previous days, before massive strike that took place yesterday, the Russians were mainly attacking the territory between Transnistria, Moldova and the Black Sea. During the previous 3 months, we've received lots of updates about Russian attacks through this territory. The main targets for Russians were bridges along the river of Dniester. Lots of bridges, pontoon bridges and different things were destroyed along the river in the area of the settlement of Mayaki. The Russians during this period of time made probably dozens of attempts to attack the Zatoka bridge, and as a result of this attack, the Zatoka bridge was damaged and destroyed, and these attacks led to the situation that the Ukrainians lost possibilities to use this territory for logistic purposes. Since the beginning of August of 2026, the number of vehicles use this territory for logistic purposes dropped significantly. And of course, this is the only area that the Ukrainians can use for world trade, to import products and to export products. So that is why the Ukrainians right now suffer huge problems with this. But the Ukrainians seems found a solution for this situation. And the thing is that the Ukrainians right now use the following tactics. According to information we have, the Ukrainians collect commercial vessels in the area of the territorial waters of Romania. So the Ukrainians, not Ukrainians, but let's say enterprises and companies concentrate their vehicles in this area on the territory of the territorial waters of Romania. But these vessels are not moving in the area of Odesa, because everybody understands that if anybody began moving in the northern direction, they would be attacked by Russian drones immediately. So that is why these vessels use the territorial waters of Romania with the purpose to answer this river, the river of Danube. And then the vessels are moving further in the northwestern direction, and using this river, these vessels are able to get the cities like Kellogg, the settlement like Izmail, and furthermore the settlement like Reni, which means that the Ukrainians still have possibilities to receive vehicles, receive munition, receive support from the Western countries using the Black Sea, using the territorial waters of Romania. And the Russians also, when the Russians discovered these new tactics, but another important thing, that the Ukrainians using these tactics have possibilities to unload products on the territory of the cities like Reni, Izmail and Kellogg, but the Ukrainians stopped using, for example, the M15 road that goes from the area of port infrastructure in the direction of the mainland, because the Russians established complete fire control over the territory between Romania, between Moldova, Transnistria and the Black Sea. So that is why the Ukrainians changed their tactics, and they began using the territory of Moldova, the road M3, with the purpose to cross the state of Moldova in the northern direction, and then to answer the west southwestern parts of Ukraine, which makes the cargo completely protected against Russian attacks. So that is why the Russians changed their tactics, and during the previous 2 days the Russians were bombing the territory along the border between Moldova and Ukraine. For example, during the previous 24 hours, lots of explosions were recorded through this border crossing checkpoint. Facilities were damaged, destroyed. The trucks, as you can see, were also damaged and destroyed. And this is not the only checkpoint along the border that was damaged and destroyed by Russians. For example, during this attack took place, for example, during the 19th of August, and for example, this attack took place during the 21st of August of 2026. Another checkpoint was badly damaged by Russians. So as you can see, the Russians are not able to stop this traffic because there is no problems to use roads, but the Russians can damage and destroy economical infrastructure or technical infrastructure. For example, if you want to send cargoes, trucks, and if you want to create, coordinate, and to control the traffic along the border between Moldova and Ukraine, first of all, you need equipment, you need computers, you need the internet, you need connection, you need all these buildings, you need places where you can check trucks and cargoes and so on. So that is why the Russians, due to the fact that they can't stop the traffic through these along the border, they decided to destroy the infrastructure. They decided to destroy computers, servers, they decided to destroy equipment that the Ukrainians use for these checkpoints. This will not stop the traffic, but obviously this will force the Ukrainians to change their tactics and probably to improve control along the border, and probably even partially to suspend operations along the border between Moldova and Ukraine. So this is the tactics that the Russians are using, but this tactics from the other side is very dangerous because both checkpoints are located very close to the territory of Romania, which is a part of the NATO organization. So that is why the Romanian F-16s have possibilities, and probably they will use their aircraft, F-16s, Typhoons, and many other different types of weapon to intercept and destroy drones that are flying in this area if they think that these drones may threaten the territory of the NATO organization. So as of now, we have a temporary solution for the Russian and for the Ukrainian side, but most likely that will not last forever. Sooner or later, most likely, NATO countries would be forced to be involved in the situation with the purpose to secure the most southwestern parts of Ukraine, with the purpose to allow the traffic between Ukraine and Moldova to exist, because if the Russians are able to destroy this traffic, this could lead to completely unpredictable consequences for the economy of Ukraine and for its export and import and weapons supply and so on. And another important thing, the Russians during the previous 24 hours were forced to suspend, to halt their attacks, because the Ukrainians, due to the fact that they don't have Patriot missiles, they were forced to call Kellogg, and the sources reported that Kellogg arrived in Ukraine. He has already arrived in Ukraine. The former US presidential special representative has already visited the Odesa region, specifically the Odesa Sea commercial port. And of course, we know that when people of his level visit the territory of Ukraine, the Russians try not to attack this territory. The Russians don't consider him as something, as an enemy or something like this. So that is why the Russians would not attack the Odesa region while this person is there. So this is the situation right now. The Ukrainians are trying to find a solution how to protect the Odesa region, and the Russians from their side are trying to find a solution how not to allow the Ukrainians to do this. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation along the line of combat contacts. During the previous 24 hours, lots of very important changes were recorded. And first, let's talk about the Zaporizhzhia direction, where the Russians continue their offensive operation. And during the previous 24 hours, as a result of clashes, the Russians improved their position significantly through the eastern Zaporizhzhia direction, and the Russians managed to capture the settlement of Zelena. And this video was published by pro-Russian sources, and in this video we can see how exactly the clashes, the battle for the settlement of Zelena were taking place. In this video we can see how Russians were attacking vehicles, how Russians were fighting for the settlement, and in the final part of this video we can see at least 2 flags raised by Russians. The Russians managed to establish complete control over the territory, and based on this video and the report that was published by the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, we have adjusted the map. Now we see that the Russians right now are continue advancing between 2 rivers. This is the river of Gaichul, and this is the river of Verkhnyaya Tersa, and now it seems that the Russians are tasked to establish complete control over the territory between rivers, and including the settlement of Novo-Nikolaevka. This is a very important task for Russians because from this configuration, the front line, both the Russians and the Ukrainians are located in the same situation. This is the territory between 2 rivers, which means that both the Russians and the Ukrainians have the same problems and issues with logistics, with supply and support, but the question is who have better and more powerful weapons. And when talking about Russians, they have aviation, which means that most likely the Russians would be able to continue advancing further with the purpose to force the Ukrainians to fall back from this side of the river of Verkhnyaya Tersa on the other side of the river, and when it happens the Russians would be able to dig in deeper and to begin regrouping and preparations before moving further in the direction of the city of Zaporizhzhia itself, because the distance between the river of Verkhnyaya Tersa and the city of Zaporizhzhia itself is already less than 50 kilometers. If the Russians advance for another 10 or 15 kilometers in the western direction, then the Russians would be able to use their artillery to attack every single square meter of the city of Zaporizhzhia without any barriers and any problems. The situation for the city of Zaporizhzhia and for the entire Zaporizhzhia direction continues deteriorating. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Dobropillia direction. During the previous 12 hours, during the previous 24 hours, we received the report published by a very reliable pro-Russian sources that as a result of clashes, the Russians established complete control over the settlement by the name of Dobropillia. This is not the big Dobropillia, this is the small Dobropillia to the south of the settlement, and these are the changes on the ground between the 17th and the 21st of August of 2026. As you can see, almost every single day we color another village under complete Russian control. Today we expected that the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation would confirm control over the settlement of Dobropillia, but this hasn't happened. Most likely the Russians will confirm this information tomorrow, and if it's true, if the Russians indeed manage to take under complete control this settlement, this means that the Russians managed to outflank the settlement of Dobropillia itself from the south and from the southwest, and this opens possibilities for Russians to continue advancing further along this tree line and to attack the main positions and the main citadel of the city of Dobropillia from behind. Meanwhile, the Russians see that the city of Dobropillia is falling into operational encirclement or is falling in cauldron, and that is why the Russians began attacking vehicles and everything that goes along TO 515 road. This is probably the only road left for the Ukrainians for supply purposes. As you can see, during the previous 24 hours, lots of videos were published right exactly from this area, and through these videos we can see how Russians were attacking vehicles that were trying to enter the settlement of Dobropillia from the north, and this is something like a kill zone that the Russians have created, and the Russians will intensify their control over the territory with the purpose not to allow the Ukrainians to enter the city, and of course not just to enter but to escape the city as well. And once again the city of Dobropillia started falling in Russia's hands in the operational encirclement. As for the other directions, during the previous 24 hours we haven't received something special, just lots of attacks. The Russians continued destroying facilities, warehouses, substations, different buildings through the city of Kramatorsk-Slavyansk. The Russians continue attacking temporary deployment points of the armed forces of Ukraine. The Russians use aviation, the Russians use drones, and as you can see according to this picture, the biggest number of icons are coming from the eastern Slavyansk Slavyansk direction. This is the territory around the settlement of Nikolaevka, and lots of icons we have through the settlement of Drushkovka. With this means that the heaviest clashes are taking place through these territories. The Russians are trying to break through Ukraine's defenses. The Ukrainians are trying to do everything they can with the purpose to hold the lines. Anyway, let's wait and see what is going to happen next, but the situation is becoming more and more difficult, first of all for the contingent of the armed forces of Ukraine. And that's it for today. The Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.